Okay, I think we're live. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Totally excited to be here and talk about really the science behind effective instructional design, especially on what I think of as the tricky compliance and culture topics. And with me today is Leann Pereira. Is it Pereira, Leann? I never asked.
It is.
For those who don't know, I'm Janine Yancey. I'm the founder and CEO of Emtrain, and Leann is our first ever head of organizational psychology here at Emtrain. Totally excited to have you, Leann. Thanks for joining us.
Super to be here. Thank you.
With the team and today in our LinkedIn Live discussion. A little background for folks on Leann. So Leann is a doctorate in education, where she in the past has conducted analysis, and at least for Emtrain, she will continue to conduct analyses on different statistical techniques, including regression analysis and correlation analysis. And she's the managing director of the Bay Area Learning Analytics Network, a group of researchers and learning professionals. And starting really this month, although she's been working with us in an extended capacity for the last couple of months, Leann will be heading up our organizational psychology and working with our research and data team really on how, frankly, on behalf of Emtrain and really as a community partner, we move everyone forward. So we get beyond just showing completions and we actually move towards KPIs and longitudinal progress year over year to show some change in our workplaces and workplace culture. So, Leann, totally excited to have you. And I think let me set the table for our discussion today. And, again, we're going to kind of talk about really the organizational psychology and the design, the science, if you will, the social science behind effective learning and what to look for. To kind of set the table, we're living in an era right now, and I think we're going to see more of it, where our notion of the corporation is changing. And it's changing in real time, and where the corporation is increasingly expected to weigh in on social issues, and with all of the influence and the power that a corporation has, be a platform to change for the benefit of society, social good. And stakeholders are not just shareholders there to reap in the profits, but the stakeholders are more broadly viewed as all the employees, all the partners, the communities in which the corporation does business. So, a way more like holistic, integrated view on the corporation and what the corporation is there to do. And so that's kind of giving you the macro view. Let me kind of focus a little bit. And I want everyone who's listening today to be aware of last summer, the Department of Justice came out in June with a memo that specifically said, hey, folks, compliance training completions, that's not enough. We need to see actual evidence of behavior change longitudinally, like year over year. Show us the results. Show us real change. And that was followed up a month later by the SEC. And the SEC, I think, responding to this change in our social expectations and where the society is going, said, hey, public companies, as part of your annual public disclosures to the market, we want to see KPIs. We want to see, key performance indicators of your employee relations, of your respect, or conversely, your harassment, of how much bias exists in your organization, of your diversity and inclusion. We want to see these metrics, not just completion certificates. And I know over the last couple of years, a number of organizations have been acquiring new technology and new applications like Glint and Culture App and other employee engagement applications. And those are certainly super helpful in cataloging, I call it the state of the state. It's like, how many women do I have? How many men do I have? How many people of color? It's like, well, let me just tabulate what you actually have. Well, and that's great, but it's not all that insightful. It doesn't give me KPIs. It doesn't tell me as a business leader where this business is going and what kind of outcomes I can expect. And then there's also some, I think, challenges, and Leann, you and I will talk about this, challenges in both psychological safety. Whenever the employer is the one doing this survey, you've got a component there of folks maybe not feeling all that comfortable being completely authentic and honest, because why should they? There's more downside than upside. And then ambiguity in some of the survey questions are just text-based questions. And there's an opportunity there for, a term like let's take the term bullying. You could have 5 different people with 5 different understandings or definitions of what bullying means based on our cultural differences, our generational differences, and our cultural differences. So I think we're kind of at the beginning stages, and we have an opportunity to actually evolve and get way more insightful. But those are my thoughts. So let me turn over to you, Leann.
Yeah. You said some really amazing things. I think the fact that employers are responsive or expect to be responsive to what goes on in the world just shows that the boundaries between the work environment and the greater social environment are very soft. And people are influenced by their, LinkedIn feeds and Facebook feeds. And that comes right into our world, our daily lives, right along with employer messages. And so I think that organizations really have to understand that there's a new landscape and there's a massive blurring of the boundaries. And yet still we have to keep people engaged, and we have to foster learning and development, because frankly, if we don't do that, then you wonder how are we representing what we want to see happen in the workplace, right? Is it only going to be represented in Facebook? Is it going to be represented somewhere outside where I can't help you develop the knowledge of what I'm trying to teach you and foster behaviors in a very pro-social way? And to your point, employers have tried to develop behavior, but they really erred on the side of compliance. I want to say they had the best of intentions.
Yeah.
But when you just roll out compliance, first of all, there's a lot of research that says that produces the wrong behaviors. And second, you're not actually looking at behaviors. You're looking at checking the box and whether or not somebody did anything. And most people barely pay attention. So
no, most of the people, even my lawyer friends, because if people don't know, I'm a lawyer, and a lot of my friends are lawyers, and even my lawyer friends will, they won't even be embarrassed to admit, oh yes, I've got a second screen going. And so all of the L&D and the HR and the compliance people, just please know, sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings, but that half of your employee base is really just doing their own work and just mindlessly hitting next, as they're going through your programs.
I totally have. People have just told me that flat out. They're like, I'm doing this in the break room on my cell phone.
Right. Totally.
And so that's totally compliance. But the bigger problem is that until recently, we didn't really have the tools to understand people's behavior. I mean, psychology is a relatively new field. And only now, the DOJ has decided to require human capital disclosures. I think they could have gone even further. But I think that's still a nod to say, hey, there's stuff beyond compliance and the law. There's this psychology stuff that has to do with attitudes and knowledge and judgment and people's emotions. And we need you to pay attention to that. And I believe we do that at Emtrain, which is why I'm thrilled with this product.
And we're thrilled to have you. So let me just kind of maybe connect the dots for some of the listeners, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So, compliance, and I've always said this, and I think people sometimes kind of scratch their head when I say this. It's I always say, hey, laws actually follow people. People don't follow laws. And what I mean by that is the laws actually materialize because we have social issues that need some regulations, right? And so really, I think what I'm certainly advocating to everyone is please don't look at compliance as oh, these are just the rules. They're not. They're the social issues. These are the social issues that make us slam up against the rocks time and time again. Hence the need for some rules. And I think the marketplace has really gone awry or astray for the last couple of decades. Is this focus on the rules without looking at the symptoms, not the root of the disease, right? So like look at the actual social impacts, talk about that, because those are the social issues. Those are the people issues that we're all interested in. Oh, and by the by, and because it's been so impactful and negative, we had to create a law on it, and here are the details of the law. It's just how you approach it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that the laws are great. We need them, but the compliance aspect is difficult. And in doing some studying on this, I really like Frank Dobbin's research out of Harvard that talks about, sometimes this can go awry when you don't address underlying behaviors. And I also like John Williams out of UC Hastings, Jennifer Eberhardt out of Stanford, who are talking, they're social psychologists, they're social scientists that talk about how to get beyond the compliance, how to help people slow down and look at this as developing a competency and skill. So it moves it out of just compliance training to actually learning skills and behaviors. And why I like Emtrain's model so much is because we use a model of competency development. We think that learning happens at all stages of life, and that people are ongoing, and our environment, our ongoing development, our environment contributes to that. And so, we teach in a social way, and we teach in a way that really captures the nuances of what's going on in people's everyday lives through video.
Super.
Yeah.
Well, so let me just kind of steer us ahead, because we only have to the top of the hour, and I know we have a few things we want to kind of share with folks. So I think you and I together identified kind of 5 criteria to focus in on. And the first one was this idea of a kind of relatable, shareable language.
Yes. So that is super important, because when we talk about these hot topics, you want to prevent ambiguity, but you want to do it in an easy way so that you can have that social learning and so that people can interact that way. So we're using something called the workplace color spectrum that creates a simple shared language so people could talk about messy, confusing interactions in a very simple way, and more importantly, not avoid these conversations. So we have the workplace color spectrum, and we code color behaviors and colors in one of 4 ways. So we have green for the optimal behavior, yellow for kind of something that's on the border, orange for when you're really starting to get into, you're going down that slippery slope towards something that's illegal, and red where you're just absolutely saying you're doing the wrong thing and it's illegal. And I think people aren't as afraid to call something out as orange as they would be to say, hey, that's against the law. And when you say orange, everyone, if they go through this training, they understand that you're talking about something that may, refer to a bias or protected characteristic, and boom, everyone's on the same page without having to agonize about how to express this.
Super. And then I think we said the second criteria is, and you could say broadly storytelling, but at least in the online format, which is, certainly where mid-market and enterprise organizations, I think, need to rely on just for scale. The way you storytell is through video scenes.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, we're using video scenes to model the behaviors that people will see. So when you see something that is happening in real life, or something that mirrors your real life, you're able to identify that more quickly. Also, people remember stories, and the way you present those videos, I mean, they're amazing. You're a combination between, I would say our team is like a fusion between Dear Abby, Who Said That, and Mindy Kaling, in the sense that they're engaging, they're real life, and they ping people's emotions, like you feel upset or you feel confused, and that level of emotional retention will help people carry that learning through, and recognize it in the workplace. So it's science and it's art, together, and it's just super cool. And how many video? I think we have 2,000 YouTube followers who are just watching our video. And Janine, the experience that we embed, the employment lawyers and litigators, I mean, they really use real life we're using real life situations. So we're not like just making stuff up. This stuff actually happened.
Yeah, no, I think, and for those who don't know, we do have a YouTube channel. Anyone who's, a member of our community, which just means follow us on YouTube or actually follow us on LinkedIn, is able to use our YouTubes, and we put all YouTube videos, and we put all of our videos up there to be, a good community partner. But it's funny, I have had Leann, you and a couple other folks say, well, gosh, how do you think of all this? And obviously it's not just me, that we've got a whole writer's room. But I think it helps that, this is where experience matters, right? Like I had 10 years of trial and litigation and investigations. And, you've got some people that are trying to write these scenes that have literally never been involved in employee conflict. They've never seen the inside of a courtroom. And, it's like entrusting your health to a surgeon who's never had an operation before. Like, you really don't want to be the first patient. It's like, having had the benefit of literally thousands of situations, you start to see things time and time again in patterns, and people exhibit patterns. They really do. And I think the nuance to getting this just so for those who are trying to kind of recreate this on their own is don't show the illegal behavior, because that's obvious. Show the stuff that we all do, our imperfect selves. That's not illegal, but that if unchecked, the next step or next two steps will turn into conflict. And that's where, if you're experienced, exactly the moment where it's like, oh shoot, unchecked, this turns into conflict.
That and so excuse me, it's not just the modeling of that behavior that I find so amazing, is that we wrap it through in something called a situational judgment test, where we ask the learner to ping us and let us know what's going on in their mind. And so this is Emtrain's way of putting a very high fidelity wrapper around the modeling of the behavior. And when we do that, we can actually then give real-time feedback to the learner, and have them understand how their response compares with the responses in the rest of the organization. And so, I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with transparency and the ability to show learners or to show how different groups interact, and we're just giving to them real time. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, folks become receptive to the notion that others may see things differently, right? You have a graph with your response on one side, but you see everybody else's on the other. Well, right there, we can show, or I'll prove to you, that people see things differently. And so you get an understanding of the social landscape, and you're learning at the same time.
Yeah, so I think that there's something there, Leann. So, our third criteria is, as you said, the situational judgment test. And I don't know of another compliance trainer that's actually doing what we do. And I'll just kind of call it out, because I think it's hugely effective and important for the learning process for a couple of reasons. The first one, Leann, you were talking about just having the transparency of seeing how other people think about issues. I think as human creatures, we're all flawed, and we all think that our opinion is the only opinion. And we assume that everyone else shares our opinion, and seeing in a safe way, and we'll get onto that, in a minute, but in a safe way, that, oh shoot, wow, my opinion is not the only opinion. In fact, I'm in the minority. Maybe the majority thinks about this situation differently. Um, there's something that to that dynamic that broadens your lens. So that's number one. Number two, I'm thinking back. Both of my kids are dyslexic, and growing up, they saw a speech pathologist. Kindergarten, first grade, to teach them how to read. And when you're teaching somebody how to read, you combine the practice with some physical activity like that. And there's something about that combination that gets it into the back of your brain, the cortex, in a much more effective way. And I'm describing that because I think the situational judgment test, when you're seeing a video scene, plus you're combining that with thinking about and answering how that scene applies to your team, your colleagues, what happens here right now today, there's something to that combination that gets that learning deeper into your cortex.
Absolutely. And, there's few ways that you can do that. In fact, the military uses situational judgment tests to help train for combat readiness. Medical schools use it to assess admission, just because there's so much going on there that these are one of the few ways that you can kind of bound a situation and really get high fidelity. So I am totally relating and understanding there. I think that's fantastic. And the other thing you mentioned was psychological safety. And that's important for so many reasons, especially when we talk about these hot topics, from an individual and from an organizational perspective, right? Because there's a lot of, it doesn't even have to be harassment. I mean, harassment enough is difficult to talk about. And people who've been the target of harassment feel shame. They don't necessarily want to go and explain this to somebody else, right? So just saying, hey, this is, I think something is yellow or going to orange, gives them that distance and safety to be able to communicate. Sorry.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think that when you're not even dealing with harassment, when you're just dealing with, say, somebody who's talking about inclusion and diversity, and we're talking about the hiring process, well, you want to discuss something, but you're hearing things, that you're getting responses from others, and you're not quite sure what to do with them. You want to create a safe bridge to talk about the fact that the candidate is Black. I've heard many times, hey, are we allowed to say Black? I'm not sure if we can say Black, and we can give you the tools and say, no, actually, that is a green behavior. It is not a yellow behavior. It is not an orange behavior. And so just having those tools helps everyday workflows in inclusion and diversity initiatives.
Yeah, so when we think of, thank you, Leann. When we think about psychological safety, I'm thinking about the many, many conversations I've had with various people, different employees, saying, even if I'm answering a survey that asks me, if we as a team are on the right track, if I say no, there's only downside for me. Like, why would I ever be honest? Critical information or any feedback that my leadership might perceive as me being critical. Like, there's no upside to me personally, so I'm out. And I've heard that consistently with so many different people I've talked to. So actually creating an environment and a technique and a solution so that everyone's anonymous, everyone's de-identified, and they get to be as open as possible. And to your point, you were talking about victims of harassment. I've seen in our solution with our Ask the Expert, where people can freeform in, submit questions. Based on the nature of their questions, we clearly have had executive leaders who need the psychological safety too, because they're afraid of not, being perceived as current and modern in their attitudes.
Absolutely. And another point about this psychological safety is when you start to get feedback and you start to see divergences where, you see that your answers are different from somebody else's, and you keep getting that feedback, you start to understand why there are issues or why there may be conflict. And that level of understanding itself can put your mind at ease, and you can begin to have a more realistic view on how to approach a situation. And let me give you an example. An executive who doesn't understand that there may be differences of perspective is at an incredible disadvantage. So once they begin to understand that folks see things differently than they do, then they could have more confidence in approaching, discussions. So I think it's a very empowering tool.
Super. We have a few more minutes left. I want to go on to the bite-sized learning component, and then talk about how employers can get evidence of progress. So, want to kind of give us your thoughts on the kind of consumable content?
Oh my God, there's so many. I mean, I think we have finally gotten to the point where learning professionals understand that small bite-sized chunks are the right way to go. And so I think we're mostly there yet, right? So, but where we're not fully is that these learning chunks must be embedded within the workflow. So teach people when they need to learn, otherwise you forget, right? And so we really take a micro and relevant approach to learning so that people can access this, make this stuff accessible when they need it. And so I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, and just a disclaimer for Emtrain, I would say we're probably 50% of where we need to be. So like all of our topics that we cover, and there's about 20 culture topics, compliance and culture topics that span compliance, HR, and diversity and inclusion, and so we cover all 20 of them. And so each of these are broken down into concepts, so like within a topic you might have 8 to 10 concepts. And so I think we've done a good job of micro lessons per concept, where I think I'm excited to see us go as a team and support the market, is these little micro lessons on each concept need to be connected with however people are communicating within their organizations and on their teams, so that they can just access it and browse it and ask the expert when they need it, consume the content how they need it when they need it.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually we're developing a relationship with Joan Williams at UC Hastings, and she's done a ton of work in bias and performance management. And so folks can look forward to that. Well, we hope to have something out in the next near term. Yeah.
Super. So with the remaining couple minutes here, I think when we talk about what the DOJ is looking for, what the SEC is looking for, and frankly, what boards and the C-suite are looking for from all of the HR and learning and compliance leaders, which is, show us an ROI, show us your key performance indicators, your trajectory to getting to certain outcomes, and an ROI. And what we're doing here at Emtrain, and what I would certainly recommend for everyone in the community and marketplace to do, is to start generating information about the state of your ethics and your respect, your inclusion, as it's broken down per these topics, which is what we do, and figure out how you're evolving. So in our 2021 workplace culture report, Leann, as you know, because you helped write it, within Emtrain's client base, about 500 different organizations, we were seeing some progress, some longitudinal progress from 2020 to 2021 on people going from bystanders to upstanders, a decrease in in-group, out-group dynamics. So some good progress that because we're capturing all these analytics and tracking them, we can actually see.
Yeah, no, it's very encouraging. I'm super excited about this, and I encourage people to reach out, look at our videos, see what we have to offer, and let us know.
Yeah. So good place to wrap up and sum up. So when you're thinking about designing effective training, you want to, at least from Leann and I, we're thinking about 5 different criteria. You want to make sure are addressed one way or another. So a shared language, storytelling, which is most easily, kind of done through a powerful video. And let's see, situational judgment tests to actually model how these concepts apply in the everyday work life experience, and then psychological safety, and then lastly, consumable content, because this, after all, if we're trying to get to better outcomes, you have to design it for your end user, not for yourself, but for your end user. And I think that's probably a lesson we're sharing with all the HR and compliance professionals, because, and I'll include myself in that bracket, we're so focused on, I have to comply with this law and this reg and this reg. We're concerned with our list, and we forget to think about our consumer and how they're going to process it and how we're going to get to better outcomes with them. So that probably more than anything else, we have to prioritize.
Absolutely.
Leann, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, I think this wraps us up. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned. Every other Tuesday, we have these conversations on kind of relevant topics for our workplace culture. So thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.